Hello, designers. So we have reached the end of our very unusual semester. It's been great working with you all. You did a lot of great work throughout under adverse circumstances, and I'm proud of what you've done. I always like to end the semester by just talking a little bit about my own experiences in the arts generally, and just to give a little case study in one person's experiences, and to highlight some themes that I think are important to think about for anybody that is interested in pursuing art at all in whatever capacity, whether it's uh, something that's professional or something that's a hobby or something in between the two. A few themes that I'd like to kind of highlight as I go through talking a little bit about my own work and my own experiences. So, first thing to say is that there are many, many ways to be involved in art. I think that we usually grow up with some notion about what art is, but we find as we get older that there are more and more different kinds of art or art related domains, and just make sure to keep an open mind as you kind of go further with art, and to be willing to have your horizons expanded in terms of what kind of art you're interested in making, or whether it's might not be art, but something that's visual in some other way. There's just a million different versions of art worlds and a million different sorts of pursuits. Everything from showing art in galleries to graphic design to illustration to fashion to um, website design to game design. So it just to keep in mind that the breadth of what that word art can really mean. Um, the next thing is to, as you go along, I think really to encourage you to, to take to try as many different things as you can. If I could have seen my post college years, if I could have never predicted basically when I was in college that the activities that I would do after college and all the different sorts of creative projects I get involved in. And I think that I didn't always take my own advice here. I think that at many times I didn't try enough things, but I think over time I've learned that getting keeping a lot of balls in the air is always can be tiring and can be confusing. But I think it's important to embrace the confusion, because we often start out with an idea about what we want to do that just gets disproved by reality, and so it's better to have be trying a lot of different things, even if you think they're not the thing you most absolutely are most interested in. One of the luxuries of being young is that you can try a lot of things, and you don't have to be married to them. Um, yeah, try a lot of different things. You never know what's going to happen. This one also took me some time to wise up to, but gain computer skills. In our class, I would be thinking mainly about uh, visual art related computer skills, and that can mean a lot of different things: Photoshop, Illustrator, other design art programs. And it could mean web design. It could mean a lot of different things. 3D. There's a million different things happening in the visual arts on the computer. I think a lot of us that end up interested in art, excuse me, and in drawing and those sorts of things. Some of us might feel like we're less computer oriented, that we almost do some of that art stuff to get away from the kind of computer world. And that is a very valid thing, and I think that's we all need refuge from our digital lives. But I will say, in terms of your ability to use art in professional contexts to find ways of making money and find ways of expanding your reach as a creative person, learning computer skills is really a must. And I think that you will find, even if you don't think of yourself as a quote computer person, and even if at first, if you're learning a program like Photoshop or Illustrator or something like that, At first, it's awkward and difficult and feels just totally not natural at all. As time goes on, it becomes incredibly natural to the point where now I feel more natural, more able to just draw freely on the computer than I even do by hand sometimes. Although, of course, I will always say that starting things by hand is usually the best bet when you're developing an idea. But don't be afraid of gaining computer skills. Embrace that. Um, Build relationships with interesting people. So, of course, these a lot of this would relate to whatever you were doing, but a huge percentage of what people manage to make happen in the arts has to do much more with building relationships with people than it does with applying for specific things through official channels. Um, it's really key to be involved with other people, and you can think of it in a negative way, like networking or something, which can often have a negative connotation, but it also can be thought of in a positive way in terms of building relationships with other people that you want to work with. Um, and it's another thing that I was slow to pick up on. When I was in college, for example, I didn't manage to develop that many close relationships with teachers, which is always a regret I've had because they probably had a lot to teach me and a lot of opportunities to open my eyes to. But it's, of course, not just teachers, it's also your peers, be they friends, classmates, or people on the other side of the world that you might be interacting with digitally. But building relationships, even for those introverts among us, is an important thing to do, and there are a lot of different ways to do it. And finally, another thing that I was slow to pick up on was if you do art of any kind, share it. Um, and I used to be much more oriented toward like gallery art, like making art to put in galleries, and uh, but over time I've moved away from that a bit, and I've just really embraced the idea that you can share your work online and build audience, build relationships with people that way, and in many ways that's much more fruitful. Okay, so those are some of my big themes. Now I'm going to give a little tour of my own personal history with art, and we'll kind of touch back on some of these themes as I go through it. All right, so um, back to my earlier times in art. So back when I was a teenager, I liked to draw and paint and stuff, and I entered some paintings in a little neighborhood art show, and where anybody can bring artwork and hang it up, and there's people come around, and sometimes people sell things, and there's judges that award ribbons and things. And this was really an important moment for me because I put some work up, and one of the judges had a little local art gallery. This is in Massachusetts, um, and she liked my paintings that I put up, and she invited me to put some paintings in her gallery. Now, this gallery is not like a big kind of New Yorky art gallery. It's like a little shop where there's smallish artworks for hundreds of dollars usually for sale, rather than thousands of dollars at like a big New York art gallery would typically have. Um, the kind of place where upper middle class people might shop for beautiful paintings from their vacation to this lovely town, and take something home with them. So these aren't my paintings, by the way. These are by another artist. I think they're all by Don McKillop, another artist I knew there. So I did this for a few years, and it was a really cool thing for me because at a pretty young age, I had the opportunity to feel like I was making artwork to sell in galleries, and I would sometimes sell paintings, and that was a really cool thing, and it helped me financially during this time, and it was just a huge ego boost to feel like I had an audience and had this kind of grown up thing I was doing when I was in end of high school and the beginning of college. And I did a lot of kind of landscape paintings. I like these kind of minimalist kind of landscape approaches, and they kind of suited this town where I was, this kind of seaside resort town. Um, and I got into painting vehicles. I found that I like to paint, and people like to paint these kind of landscapes, but with vehicle elements, oftentimes kind of old-fashioned, kind of nostalgic vehicles of one kind or another. Um, and that became kind of my thing for a while. Uh, and each year while I was in college, I would show these paintings. While in college, I was actually majoring in art history, which I had always sort of thought of myself as more as liking to do art, but really more fundamentally interested in art history. Um, but by the time I got to the end of college, I was sort of realizing that I was not going to pursue art history in any serious way, particularly that I wasn't going to, that being a professor of art history wasn't in my future really. I liked it, but I just didn't think I had the desire to try to continue on to do a PhD or anything like that. And I just really found that I liked to make art. And from these art shows that I was doing once a year in the summertime, trying different sorts of styles with my painting. Um, I was really enjoying that. So when I graduated from college, I moved to New York with my wife, and the first job I had was a job at a silkscreen printing studio, which I mentioned before in this class, called Brand X Editions, which made very high-end silkscreen prints for artists, many big-name artists, and there were these very meticulous things, and there were many people working there. I didn't have much skill in making silk screening or anything, so I had a very low down job. Was paid, $8.50 an hour, something like that, and it was almost like working in kind of like a little factory because we would have these cranking out these prints of these for these artists. But it was a very cool job in many ways because these artists would come in to these very serious, often big name artists would come in to work on these things, and I kind of got a little window into the big New York art world. Through this job and got a little taste of it. And so that was exciting, though it was very low paying and it was involved a lot of noxious chemicals. It was a very good experience. Um, and Through that job, I ended up working for an artist. So one of the artists that was making something there needed an assistant. So I went to work for this artist who made, among other things, very large metal sculptures. An artist named Bernard Venet, and he made these enormous steel sculptures. And I worked for him. And one of the coolest parts of that job was flying around to oversee installations of his sculptures. Like a sculpture like this would be many different parts, and I'd be there kind of overseeing the crane as it lowered different parts into place. It was kind of stressful in many ways, and it was, again, not a high-paying job at all, but it was an interesting experience that gave me a bit more insight into the sort of big art, capital A art world of New York, the world of big galleries and, $500,000 price tags and things like that. So at this time, I was really, thinking that I wanted to be an artist. That was my primary goal, and I was trying to kind of learn a bit more about art in New York City because, of course, in the art world and all really creative industries, New York is a major center for them. And I would go to these galleries. This is the Chelsea Gallery neighborhood on the west side of Manhattan, with these big sort of intimidating galleries that you walk in and you know that it's open, but you don't necessarily feel that welcome because it's these big right rooms that are very quiet and imposing. But I think one thing you learned over time is that this New York art world, which can seem so intimidating, is really just people. They don't have any special magical knowledge or anything. And Gaining the confidence to kind of walk into a gallery space, to strike up conversations, was something that took me a long time to do, but was an important process for me of kind of getting over that feeling like I didn't belong, and just kind of acting like you belong, and then you kind of start to belong. Um, And I'm showing this picture of the Chelsea art galleries here, but of course there are galleries all over the city, and they range from people's apartments that they set up as little art galleries to uh, these giant galleries here. So there is just an infinity of art going on and art being shown in New York City at all times, and so much of it is for free to see. Um, and it's important to realize that, and to once we get back to normal-ish life, it can be really fun to go to art openings and uh, just see what's going on and meet people, and it's a very exciting place that is different from most every other place in America in terms of the art that is accessible. So I was, working these jobs, having not making very much money, of course, and trying to figure out what to do next. And my wife had entered the Brooklyn College MFA in writing, getting her Master's of Fine Arts in writing. And so I applied to some art graduate schools and ended up coming to Brooklyn College to get a graduate degree in art. Um, Basically, the degree I was going for is a MFA, which is a Master's of Fine Arts, and in this case was a visual arts, like a fine arts MFA, where you learn about making art and the gallery world and that sort of stuff. Um, an MFA in fine art. There are many other kinds of graduate degrees, though, that one can get in art. And again, back to that theme of there are many different art worlds, many different domains of art. Like if you decide that you were more interested in graphic design or illustration, there could be other options for other graduate programs that are not so gallery art oriented, but are oriented to whichever field one might be interested in. But I ended up going here to this to the MFA program, Brooklyn College, where up on right around our classroom that we used to meet, there are lots of different studios for art graduate students who are when you apply the program, if you get in, you get a studio space and you get 2 years to work there, and it's really a much if it was a much more affordable option than School of Visual Arts, which I also got into, but which cost, I don't know, 5 times more, 6 times more. Um, so I was pleased with the choice that I ended up making there. Um, I was in this program trying to figure out what to do, what new kind of art to make, and I was kind of staring at these blank canvases and just trying to figure out what to do. And I kind of got a little bit um, stuck with painting. There's something kind of that can be a little intimidating about a big blank canvas. And so what I ended up doing was kind of really simplifying things, and trading in the canvas for more just pieces of paper and a pencil and a ruler, just some simple materials. I've talked before in the semester about my belief that usually we do not do enough brainstorming in our creative processes. That usually there's a lot of a temptation to have an idea and then jump towards making some big polished final version of it. But that usually we would be benefiting from spending more time in a more open-ended, low stakes kind of brainstorming phase. And this was the idea that I kind of got on a roll with, and I started just making these little drawings that were kind of goofy and surreal and simple, and I would just make one after the other and see what would happen. And they kind of ended up being a lot about making little funny ideas in a way, where little strange things would happen. Sometimes like a joke, sometimes like not quite a joke. These little oddities, and I just drew one after the other, and until they really started to pile up, and kind of became my thing while I was in grad school. And I set up my studio, that this is right down the hall on the 6th floor there, as like this kind of library of images, and I built these funny displays for the different things, and these little funny racks and things. so that when you would go into this space, it would almost be this like world of these funny little drawings. And they really started to stack up, into the thousands of drawings. Um, and I just took such a pleasure in it because each idea could be quick and could work out or not work out, or be something or be nothing, and it just felt very freeing compared to trying to make some big painting that made some statement of some kind. Um, there was a kind of a humble kind of pleasure to these. And this was my if I ever had a creative breakthrough, this was it. And I managed to, after grad school, still not employed that highly, but I managed to get some teaching at Brooklyn College. Now we all know the difference between adjuncting and full time, right? So this was adjunct teaching, which is still what I do for Brooklyn College, and I started teaching art there, and I have other various odd jobs, and all the while trying to kind of make some headway with showing my artwork, and various opportunities came along over the years, over those first years. This is a big group of my drawings on display at an art fair in Miami, and other shows, along these lines, where I hang up these grids of many different drawings. Over here, this cabinet is full of the whole, thousands of drawings that people could sift through too. And so it's going kind of well. I kind of had a shtick going. I kind of think of it this way: like my drawings are kind of this in-between point between the sort of minimalism and this wackiness. And I found something very fun and sort of fertile in that overlap between the two. But of course, through all this, there's always trying to figure out, how am I going to make a living? How am I going to make money? The opportunities to show art are great when they happen, and you can make money when they happen, but they are not enough to sustain oneself. So as I said before, really trying to always be expanding your skill set, learning new things, trying new things that might be related to your core interests, but a little off to the side. So it's around this time that I started dabbling more on the computer. And I started working on making logos. And there was this site, which I guess still exists, but it was a while back, 99 Designs, where people put out, people that want some logo or something designed will put out a thing, and then people do drafts and compete to get theirs chosen to get money for their design. Kind of not a great experience in terms of that, because you end up doing all this work, and that it doesn't, usually you don't win, and I think almost all of these designs are not actual ones that were used, but but it was a great way for me to learn the computer, to learn making digital designs on the computer. All of these are made in Illustrator. And various other things. So once in a while, a logo design job would come in, and those are great. I started doing other things too. I started learning more about making videos online. I started making videos first for my wife's books, because she writes novels, and I made these videos for her books, and then sometimes for others. This is one I did for somebody's sort of spy novel. It's a video that I made, like an animation. So learning some animation skills was something I was doing on the side too. And then, in terms of like trying other oddball things, this was another very left field one. So a friend of mine had an idea to make this kind of deck of playing cards that was sort of unusual. And we developed this idea for this deck of playing cards where instead of numbers and suits, it was pictures, and a kind of almost like a visual code that had to be figured out, so that this deck of cards has 4 suits and has all the numbers, but you have to sort of figure out the code of how it all works. It's sort of a puzzle more than a deck of cards, even though once you figure out the code, it is a true deck of cards, in a sense. So we worked on this for a long time, figuring out all these images, designing all this on the computer. I learned a lot through that. We did a Kickstarter campaign for this. If you do anything in the game realm, uh, the Kickstarter is fantastic because there's just tons of people that use Kickstarter that are super excited to see any new cool game thing or card thing. So that was a very cool and unusual experience of developing this, doing a Kickstarter campaign, making a lot of money from the Kickstarter campaign. Well, making a good bit. Of course, most of that money goes back into printing the cards and everything. Yeah, overall not a money making venture really, but a very cool venture, and a lot of people have these cards, and they were in some museum bookstores and things like that. So that was a cool experience. And throughout all this time, one thing that I just realized more and more was the importance, as I said before, of sharing your work. I had spent so many years kind of hoping to get my work in galleries and seen that way, but it's much more direct to just kind of go straight to the audience. So I started using Instagram, and I really have found that to be tremendous because people get interested in your work on Instagram, and the people that you do know and are already connected with, it kind of reminds them about your work, and it also kind of keeps you working. The idea of having something to post can sometimes be a little extra push to do something, and it also encourages you to do things quickly. I'm a big believer, as you've seen, from the idea of a little bit of time spent on a small idea presented in a modest way can often be better than something that you slave for months on to get every little detail. And so it was a really good context, especially for my kind of working of making all these little drawings, a perfect way to present them. And over time, I've gotten more and more out of it. Along the way, there has been a few like major boons, like the through that show through some other art shows, I got opportunities to do some commissions for companies. So again, something I never could have pictured, never could have planned for, but this is an installation of drawings all about technology and offices and businesses that I did for a company, a mobile advertising company called Cargo. And this is an installation of theirs in their building over the Strand Bookstore in Manhattan. Tremendously gratifying to have a big job like this to do, where you're getting paid a nice big amount of money that you can count on. Make a contract for it and really kind of do it all proper. Very exciting thing. I did one section like this for their New York offices, one for their offices in Chicago. And then through this led to another one that I did, a similar sized installation for the company Logitech, which makes computer peripherals and things, an installation of drawings for their offices in California. So these kind of gigs are so amazing when you get them. They're very difficult to fish for, but they've been some big exciting things that came along that I never could have predicted. Various other things, like here's my friend who also went to Brooklyn College has this wonderful wine bar in Sunset Park that I did this mural for their facade that was up for a year. Throughout, it's always trying to find new ways of kind of being professional as an artist. I kind of put out a call for when I was really struggling a couple of years back to try to figure out what I should be doing work-wise in addition to my teaching and my other stuff to really have more of a full work life. And a contact that I made a connection with a contact of mine, a friend who works for a company that makes videos that explain scientific stuff through these hand-drawn animations. It's called Minute Earth. Is the company, or is the channel that the videos are made for. And so for about a year and a half, I worked for them making videos that are these meticulously planned out videos that look simple when you see them, but are actually very planned out, that explain these scientific concepts through these hand-drawn stop-motion animations where I've got a camera above me snapping pictures of my hand and I'm planning it all out. And those have been a very interesting project to do, develop some other skills that I never would have thought about, really kind of helped me strengthen certain of my visual explanation skills. So that's been a great thing as well. Um, and then the most recent thing that I've been working on, I've always wanted to get work into the New Yorker because my drawings, which are sort of small, simple, but have some sort of wittiness to them, I always thought that would be great if they could get into the New Yorker magazine, which is one of the few magazines that still really focuses on kind of clever illustration and cartoons. And I a while ago sent a book that I had self-published. I've done a couple of different books, but this was one book that I had self-published of sort of funny drawings that were all about art and the art world. And I sent a copy of it to their cartoon editor, and she invited me to submit cartoons to them. And I've sort of the past year and a half or whatever it's been, 2 years almost, I guess a year and a half, been submitting cartoons to the New Yorker. And the way it works is every week you submit a batch, and usually they don't buy any, but sometimes they do, and it's very exciting. And they pay quite well too. And so I've been doing these cartoons for the New Yorker that has been very exciting. So yeah, so that's sort of where I landed right now. I'm always sort of trying to figure out what the next step is going to be. I've got various kind of graphic design ideas and projects, and always kind of percolating and trying to find time and trying to figure out what to prioritize is always a challenge. But yeah, I've just, as time goes on, try to embrace the mess of it and try to try a lot of different things and see what works. And I think that even if you're not involved in art, I think that these things apply. This kind of basic ethos of trying a lot of things and seeing what works applies to a lot of stuff. I mean, our world is so increasingly freelance, and our professional lives of people are constantly changing, and kind of being alert to opportunities and trying a lot of different things is just a kind of a survival necessity these days. So I hope that there's something interesting to be gleaned from all of that. And I just wanted to say again that I've really enjoyed working with you all. You all will have comments on your pieces on Blackboard, and of course be commenting on one another's pieces as well. I'll also be sending each of you the complete compiled comments for the pieces that you've made that people have posted on Blackboard. And that will bring us to a close. Please never hesitate to be in touch with me about any art-related, school-related questions you might have, and I'll answer as best I can. If you ever need recommendations, whatever help you might need, I'm here to be a resource. And yeah, never hesitate to email me. My Gmail account is the same. And thanks again. Take care, and hope you have a good summer.